Hey everyone, Marcus Rein here, and we're going to be going in about 3 minutes. So, welcome. We'll be talking about developing subgraphs with Subgraph Studio. So, I hope everyone's doing well. I'm going to go ahead and open up the chat. For those of you jumping in, I'll be monitoring the chat in Discord. So, if you haven't joined our Discord in the graph, go ahead and join. It's got plenty of subgraph developers in there looking to help out as much as possible. And so that is a good thing to have subgraph developers helping out. So let's see, got the chat window open, looking at Twitter as well. We're streaming to Twitter. We are streaming to Discord. We are live, multiple locations. So, hi everyone. Just going to turn my notifications off off my phone. I am right now in Cincinnati, Ohio, for a conference, and I'm excited to be hanging out with everyone today. Hope everyone's doing well. We're going to be hanging out and talking subgraphs and developing subgraphs. All right. Okay, how is everyone doing today? Just be hanging out for a little bit. Let everyone filter in. Let's see, managing all the chat windows. Just curious, has everyone been having a good start to their September? It's crazy. It's already September. We good, mate. How's the audio? Thank you, Ray. How's the audio? Can you hear me well? We're doing good? Yes, good. There's been some trouble with my audio in past sessions. So just wanted to be sure that is clean. Okay. We'll get going in about a minute. In a minute. Da da da. All right. The intent today is pretty cool. I like talking about workflows. I think I heard a good quote the other day. We don't always aspire to our goals, we default back to our systems. And I really like that quote because, yes, we all have these goals and they might change at any given day. And that's exciting, that's fun, that's interesting. However, our systems are many times more important just due to the nature of life and all the different transitions that can occur. So I like this concept of just understanding our environment, our development environment really well. That's really important to just know our development environment. So there's a few things in Subgraph Studio that I'm routinely talking with developers about, wanting to make sure they have the information they need. And I put it into a little workshop today. Hopefully, it's helpful for builders out there to just understand a little bit more about Subgraph Studio and a few of the intricacies that are part of the development process. So we're going to wait a few more minutes for everyone to come in. If there's any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. I'm able to monitor Twitter, which I'm doing my best to monitor, and Discord. Maybe can I monitor YouTube at the same time? That would be pretty cool. Let's try that out too. So many different chats at once. That's okay. But anyways, okay, it's 1:01 p.m. Where I'm at. I'm in Cincinnati for a conference, but I wanted to go over this today. If everyone is ready to get going for what's the future plan? Good question, Ray. The future plan for what? What's the future plan today? All good. We'll get that question clarified soon. But anyways, hi everyone. I'm Marcus. I work developer relations with Edge and Node, and we're going to be talking subgraphs today, specifically building subgraphs in Subgraph Studio, making sure that there's a resource for builders out there to really understand the ins and outs of using Subgraph Studio in relation to development and also into production. How does that relate to the graph network? How does that relate to GRT? curation, all of these things, I try to put into a nicely summarized workshop that if you're getting started building subgraphs and you have questions about deploying a subgraph, publishing a subgraph, and a few of those dynamics, this is the workshop for you. So any questions, please drop them in the chat. I am managing 3 different chats right now and also presenting a workshop. So feel free to drop questions in the chat, and then I will get to the questions at the end of the workshop. But before I get into the workshop today, what I want to do is see if I can share my screen. And I want to go ahead and share, let's see, the window. Here we go. There's a few announcements. What I want to do is share. I want to make sure that builders out there know about Builders DAO. There is a DAO that I am really appreciative of that is responsible for building really, really, really good subgraphs and substreams. And so if there's anyone out there that wants to get in contact with developers that are regularly working on really quality subgraphs and substreams, and then also getting paid through contracts, that is Builders DAO. And it is a DAO, so there's an application process. You do have to show your skills if you want to contribute to some of these contracts. If you just want to have a community that's really dedicated to building subgraphs, these guys are real good builders. So I do love the Graph Discord. There's tons of builders in there. That's good for hopping in, hopping out. But when you're ready to commit to a DAO that has some incredible builders, check out Builders DAO. You can go find them at buildersdao.tech. And I will share that in the chat. Marcus's face is a little pixely though. Thank you, Lewis. If anything else is coming up, I'll little as in very. Oh no! Hopefully my Wi-Fi. I'm at a hotel right now. This is a conference life. Is the audio coming in okay? I hope. Hope the audio is okay. I look good, but it's all pixely. Okay. Audio is super. Then we can go with the audio, and I'll make my screen when I'm sharing it as big as possible. How's that sound? Okay. So yes, if you haven't checked out Builders DAO, go to buildersdao.tech, read about them. There are some quality subgraph and substream builders in there that just want to help with anyone that wants to get a subgraph or substream built, as well as have builders learn from them and learn from their experience. So just reach out. Good people. So let's go ahead and go into today's workshop. Today's workshop is, let's go ahead and turn on the slideshow. Every once in a while, I'll hop into the chat, see what's going on. Hopefully everyone can see. You know what? Actually, what I could do, let's do this. I'm going to put this chat on my phone. There we go. Problem solving. Discord. There we go. Let's see if I can do this live. All right. See if I can see my chat. Oh, well, I'm not going to do that. Anyways, I'll do that next time. Here we go. Building with Subgraph Studio and the graph. Let's get into it quickly. This is an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to understand a subgraph's life cycle. It, of course, starts with the CLI. We're not really going to go into the CLI. This assumes that you've already downloaded, installed, and used the CLI. You have already spun up a subgraph, and you're just trying to understand a little bit more about Subgraph Studio and how it relates to the graph. And that's where we're going for most of this presentation. We'll go into Subgraph Studio and, of course, how it relates to the graph network. And then at the end, we'll talk about querying subgraphs and making sure the endpoints are dialed in. Actually, kind of talk about that throughout the presentation. So let's get going. For those of you who build subgraphs regularly, you'll know this CLI well. I just want to highlight that this is the most recent version right now, 0.80 and 0.80.0. So if you haven't updated your CLI, let this be your sign, update your CLI. There's a new feature that is Graph Publish that allows anyone to publish to the graph network from the CLI. So we're not going to talk too much about the CLI on this. If you want, there's other workshops that we've done in the past specifically to the CLI, as well as if you're building regularly, you're going to get to know this thing very well. Let's get into understanding Subgraph Studio, which is really I like to look at it as a development environment for our subgraphs. We are able in this studio to have a true development environment that we can push to production, and we have version control on both locations. We also have a certain few strategies that are useful in Subgraph Studio to implement when going from development to production. So let's start with kind of going over a high level overview of what that is. So you'll see this a lot in documentation. You'll see this talked about a lot. Deployed versus published subgraphs. What does that mean? So when you're deployed, you have spun up a subgraph locally onto your local machine, and you have done a deploy. You've done in the CLI graph deploy, and that sends the subgraph to the upgrade indexer, which is an indexer that is run by a few of the teams that are building the graph. And that is going to stay in a private environment. That is going to be in Subgraph Studio. That is a deployed subgraph in a private environment, and the indexing is provided by that upgrade indexer. It is free, it is rate limited, and is meant for development. This development environment has a development endpoint, and you, if you're a developer and you're just testing, you just want to go ahead and iterate your subgraphs, that is the place for you. You want to stay in the deployed status, and you don't have to worry about publishing to the graph network. So if you are there into that development environment, and you're, let's say, at a hackathon, and you're trying to build, and you just need to have a subgraph built, and it doesn't need to have rate limits removed. You don't necessarily want to pay for queries. You don't want to go ahead and pay to have that subgraph indexed on the graph network. Just don't. Keep it deployed, and you're totally fine. That API endpoint is exposed, that development endpoint is exposed, and you are free to query to your heart's content. So, high level overview of published subgraphs. That is really for production. When you have taken your subgraph and you've given it the features that you want, you've tested, you've iterated, you've found the version that you think you want to remove the rate limiting on and produce a lot of you want to have a lot of queries be sent to the subgraph. You want to publish the subgraph to the graph network. This is production on the graph. It is public on the Explorer. So if you want to go ahead and keep your subgraph private and keep it there, you shouldn't publish it. All right, you should keep it in that deployed status. Anything that's published onto the graph network is going to be searchable. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. But that is going to be indexed by the upgrade indexer, as well as any other indexers that are on the graph network that become alerted about your subgraph recently being published. They're alerted, they're told, hey, we've got our subgraph, there's a new subgraph on the graph network, and maybe they're incentivized to index that subgraph and hop in. So then you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 indexers indexing that one subgraph, providing redundancy. So on the graph network, when you publish and you pay that GRT to go ahead and publish to the graph network, there's no rate limits. And then it's also free to query up to 100,000 queries per month. And then after you get past that 100,000 queries per month, there's $38 per million queries. So that's the high level overview of the difference between deployed and published. And you'll see that throughout the documentation and videos all the time. I just wanted to have one-stop shop, high level overview of what those are before we start diving in a little bit deeper into deployed and what that is, what that means, and what that means for the development process with Subgraph Studio. So here we are in Subgraph Studio, and this is a subgraph that I have gone ahead and played with and deployed, and I'm actually doing a workshop in a week or two on IoTeX, which I'm quite excited about. And this subgraph, as you can see, has a version right here, and its status is deployed. I can maybe, I'm gonna actually go back to chat real quick. Can everyone see? Can everyone see my chat window? Is that still too pixelated? I can see if I can make that bigger. Are we good? Lewis, Pinex, Builders DAO. Okay, I'm just gonna keep on going unless someone says it's really pixelated, okay? All right. Okay, so when a deployed subgraph is deployed, once again, it's private. This is your development environment, and this is your location as a subgraph developer to deploy, extend, test your subgraphs, figure out what you like, what you don't like, break the dang thing, have a zillion versions, have as many versions as you want, deploy, deploy, deploy. No one will ever see this subgraph, and from there, you'll be able to really See what kind of features are out there that you want to have. See what you want, what you don't want. Really get it going how you like it, and actually plug the development endpoint into your front end. Really start using your Subgraph, test, and use this Subgraph Studio for your deployed subgraphs. Tip number 2 with your deployed subgraphs, I kind of hinted at this, use our resources. Stay in the loop of new subgraph techniques as well as older subgraph techniques. I'm just going to show some images of all the different resources that are out there. Of course, there's the docs. We have a new Twitter account that is run by a lot of the developers, the core developers in the graph. So any new development news that's out there, let's say new feature, new updates, there's a tutorial, there's a workshop, it's going to be posted on Graph Devs. So go ahead and find Graph Devs on Twitter and subscribe. Also, Graph Builders newsletter. Every single month, there's going to be highlights of new features as well as seeing builders and what they're actually doing with subgraphs as well as substreams too. Go to the Graph YouTube, subscribe to the Graph YouTube. There's tutorials going there. There's also workshops through ETH Global. You'll see me, you'll see other DevRels giving workshops through ETH Global. If you haven't seen ETH Global's YouTube channel, it's fantastic. And you can search through ETH Global, the Graph, and there's probably a dozen or two live workshops between me and other DevRels with the Graph. Also, go to our Discord. There's so many people in there all the time that are happy to answer questions. And we have a really good support team that is there to help you with any bugs, any issues. Their response time is like super fast. So really happy to have them on the squad. And then also, of course, Builders DAO. They're out there. They're there to help. They're there to see if there's any questions that you guys might have and see if what you can do and see if you really want to push your subgraph and substream development experience. So go use all those resources. And I'm going to bring it back home really quickly. All of those, there's a ton of resources, but if you're like, where should I start? Start here. Subgraph best practice number 1. Make sure you're doing best practice number 1. Make sure you're doing subgraph best practice number 2. Best practice number 3, and best practice number 4. That was a lot of information. Go back to this video if you're wondering, hey, what features should I implement into my subgraph? What can it do? What can't it do? Talk to people. Of course, do that. But really start with the fundamentals if you want to have a good place to start. Subgraph best practice 1 through 4 is a great place to start. So tip number 3 with your deployed private subgraphs, and this is a good thing to know when you're developing in Studio, make sure you're using the correct endpoints as you upgrade your subgraph from version 0.01, 0.0, all those versionings all the way up through. You will have a /latest endpoint, which will always query the latest endpoint of the latest deployed subgraph that you have created. However, if you have that latest in your front end and you're always hitting that endpoint, that subgraph that you have just recently deployed might not fully be indexed. And so you might be at like 10 to 20% indexed, and then your endpoint is querying that data, which is way farther back than Chainhead. So what I like to do is when I'm do a new semver, like a new version that's quite significant, I always like to use the actual specific endpoint, the actual query URL that is not the /latest, that's actually the version included in the endpoint. And that's just going to be more accurate. I don't do that all the time with smaller updates, but whenever there's a larger update, I like to go ahead and use that. So just something to think about when you're actually building a subgraph and you have your front end. Make sure that you're using the correct endpoint, either latest or a specific version. Make sure you know the caveats on that. So that was really quickly going over a few different things about deployed subgraphs. Just understand deployed is private. Once again, it's free, it's rate limited. You can go ahead and build for your hackathon, for your project, for your team, testing different subgraphs, have fun. We're going to now talk about published subgraphs, and we're going to go a little bit deeper into there, as well as a few different tips that I think are important. So first things first, when you're in Subgraph Studio, you're going to be building your subgraph, and I see a lot of subgraphs published without metadata. Make sure you put in good metadata before you publish. You don't have to do that right away, because when you publish, your subgraph is now public, and that public endpoint, that public data, that open data, is going to be accessible by everybody. And ideally, you want to be proud of your subgraph and have it be searchable. If you don't put in good metadata, it will not be searchable, and others will not be able to find it and use what you have worked so hard to build. So make sure you put in good metadata, put in a good name, good description, put in your source code, put in the website that source code and Subgraph is populating, also categorize it. That's just good practice to have with your published Subgraph. Tip number 2, and this is a big one. When you are about to publish your Subgraph, we're right before publishing, by the way, we're still in metadata, we're still putting information. You want to be sure that your your deployed Subgraph has fully synced to 100% before you publish. Now, there's a reason for that. Let's say your deployed Subgraph that's still private is only at 50%. And it's private there, so no one knows it exists, but it's only at 50%. When you publish your Subgraph and it goes into a public version, you have a public endpoint, it will only be at 50%. So the world will see your Subgraph, and it still has to take time all the way to get up to chain head. So ideally, what you're going to do is say, hey, it's deployed, it's a private version of the Subgraph. I'm going to wait till it gets to chain head all the way 100% synced, and then I'm going to publish that version. And then that Subgraph will be fully synced on the Graph network, so you don't have to worry about waiting and people wondering where the data is. Is it old data? Is it new data? Why isn't it fully synced? Just keep your new version Subgraph private as a deployed Subgraph, let it fully sync, and then go ahead and publish that new version so it can be fully synced at chain head once published. That's a really big tip right there. Another one here, when you're publishing your Subgraph, you have a choice to add a certain amount of tokens of GRT onto that Subgraph to incentivize work on the Graph network. Now, if you add a little bit of curation, that token signal is called curation, a little bit of nomenclature here, but you could add the curation in the form of GRT onto that Subgraph. And if you add enough, you'll incentivize many indexers to hop in and index your Subgraph. And so this Subgraph I'm looking at right here, hopefully you guys can see it's not too pixelated. I think as I recall, there was like 5,000 or 6,000 GRT on it, and there's 11 indexers on it. And of course, this is an open market, so depending on the value of GRT, depending on the market itself, more GRT, you will have more indexers hopping in and incentivized to index your Subgraph and providing better quality of service. Essentially, there's more competition for your queries, there's more competition for your Subgraph, and there will be a better quality of service, more redundancy. If any of those indexers, for whatever reason, go down, you've got backups. So something to think about when you're publishing, to have good quality of service. Tip number 4, when you're publishing and you're in a public environment, endpoints are still a thing. You have multiple endpoints, and that's where Subgraph ID versus deployment ID really becomes important. Make sure that you know the difference, and there's a little cookbook in the docs called literally Subgraph ID versus deployment ID. I wrote this 6 to 8 months ago, I think. Just understand the difference between the two, and you'll have a similar endpoint management to your deployed Subgraph versus your published Subgraph, because there might be multiple versions of your Subgraph published. You want to make sure you have the right version at your front end. And then also when you're deployed Subgraphs, you want to make sure you have the right version when you are querying from the front end. Really make sure you know those differences when you're working with Studio, okay? So let's go ahead and round this mini workshop up. I think that was a lot of information, pretty compact, hopefully helpful. Something that is also good to look at when you're querying is optimizing your querying. Now, we're not necessarily interacting with Studio right now, but we kind of are, because a lot of times when we're sending test queries, we are in the playground. Go ahead and understand GraphQL a little better by going through this document in our docs, Querying Best Practices, that goes over GraphQL and how GraphQL can really be optimized, just like anything in indexing and databases. Use a good understanding of GraphQL when you're interacting with our subgraphs. So, other considerations: if you are deploying your subgraph to multiple chains, I like templating. Use handlebars.js, which can actually have multiple chains easily deployed through scripting. And then also, of course, when you're on the graph and you have published your subgraph to a public location, make sure you secure your dang API key. There's already security baked into using your API key. You can authorize your subgraph to only be you can authorize your API key to only be used with certain subgraphs. And then also you can authorize a domain to be linked to only a specific subgraph. So, or the other way around, the subgraph can be linked to the domain. So just secure your API key. Those are just two things baked into the Graph and Subgraph Studio. So, of course, in the Graph ecosystem, we love the Graph, so please scan this, join anytime. And I'm going to go back to chat, and hopefully this wasn't too pixelated. Let's see chat. Oh no, the screen share was just showing half. That's hilarious. Okay. That's the way it goes. That is the way it goes. We're going to keep on going here, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and redo this. It's all good. We're going to keep on going. This is office hours. I'm going to go ahead and start over, and we're going to make an edit on this. I did go pretty detailed. Thank you, Lewis. Thank you, chat. I'm going to go ahead and try again, but this time, let's try manual just with this screen. The whole time, it was just half the presentation. Oh my goodness. Yep, stuck on one page. Oh my goodness. That's the way it goes. Okay, how about right now? Are you able to see the entire screen right now? Nope, can't even see. All right, I'm going to restart the share. Let's try this again. We're going live, everybody. That's okay. All right. Let's try this again. Screen. I'm going to go ahead and do the entire screen. I just did a single window on this one. And we have the infinite window, which is good. I'm back in Discord. That's so funny. That might be a Riverside feature. I think that's a Riverside feature. We're trying a new feature that is a new system that is Riverside, and it's great. But let's go ahead. I'm going to hide. Curious. This is interesting. Is it better now? Are we good? It looks like we're good. I'm actually looking at Discord right now. It looks like you can see the infinite screen. And if I go back to GBOH, building with a Subgraph Studio, how are we doing there? How are we doing there? Chat. That's the way it goes, isn't it? So funny. Let's see if I can see chat on my phone. This is a good time to set that up. Can I see chat on my phone? Are we in? There we go. Let's go to chat. Okay. Yep, that looks good. I'm seeing chat on my phone. We're good. So funny. We're gonna thank you for being patient, chat. You know, I appreciate y'all. All right. Well, shout out to Dave who does the editing on this. We're gonna make this nice and tight for the edit. I'm going to go ahead and start over. For those of you that got this information already in chat, go ahead and feel free to have a good rest of your day. I'm going to go through this one more time for the sake of having good quality office hours. Hopefully we get through this without having any more errors. And then from there, we'll have a good rest of our day. So here we go, everybody. Take two. Building with Subgraph Studio and the graph. So first things first, let's go through a quick high-level overview of what we're going to be going over. We're going to understand a subgraph's life cycle. And this assumes that you're already using Graph CLI. You've already deployed Subgraphs. You already understand how to use Graph CLI. We're going to understand Subgraph Studio, and that's kind of the meat of this presentation, and then how Subgraph Studio interacts with the Graph network. And then finally, at the end, we'll talk a little bit about querying subgraphs. I'll kind of talk about it throughout a little bit with the endpoints. So once again, this is Graph CLI, and Graph CLI is awesome. If you have had a chance to use it, you know how well built it is. There's a new feature in Graph CLI that is Graph Publish that I want to highlight. Shout out to the CLI builders on the team. Essentially, you could publish from the CLI, so you don't have to go ahead and go in Studio. You could just do Graph Publish, and it'll take you through the process right there. So give that a try if you haven't already. So what is Subgraph Studio? Subgraph Studio is a development environment for our subgraphs. It allows us to have an understanding of our versions, have some type of version control. Different endpoints are represented, either they be deployed endpoints or published endpoints. And understanding the difference between deployed and published through Studio is really what we're going to be doing a lot of today. So we're going to talk about these deployed and published subgraphs a lot. We're going to dive in a little bit here into this, but first let's go into a high-level overview of what deployed versus published subgraphs are. First things first, deployed subgraphs are really meant to be used in a development environment. That is a private environment. You, as the subgraph deployer, will be the only one that actually sees this subgraph. It's private for use for you and your development endpoint. It is also rate limited and free. So go ahead and deploy to your heart's content, use it as much as you want, add new features, take away features, extend, do whatever you want. And that is in the deployed status. A published subgraph is a public subgraph that is on the Graph network. It's meant for use in production. The rate limits are gone. There's no more rate limits on the Graph network when you have published your subgraph. And 100,000 queries are free per month if you would like to query that subgraph that's on the Graph network. And when you are past that free plan, then there's the growth plan, which allows $38 per million queries. So that is essentially the high-level overview of deployed versus published. So let's go ahead and move on to diving in a little bit deeper to deployed subgraphs here. So we've got these deployed subgraphs, and we're looking right now at a subgraph that I'm currently building for IoTech. So we're going to be doing a workshop next week or the week after. This is a private environment. Like I said, it's got a version. You can see version 0.0.2. It has a few new features that I did from 0.0.1. It's currently indexing. And this is the place for me as a subgraph developer to iterate, to extend, test, figure out what I want my subgraph to do. How do I want to handle, do I want to do errors? Do I want to do different types of entities? Do I want to do different types of relations? All of this is my private environment to have fun, test out queries, go ahead and see what features I could add. Can I break the subgraph? Can I do whatever I want to do? Have fun, figure out, get it ready for showtime, for production, or just keep it here if you want it for a hackathon, or whatever else you want to do. Totally free. The resources, this is another tip that I want to say for these deployed private subgraphs. This is a good time to just kind of immerse yourself in the resources of the graph as a whole. In here, we've got our docs. The docs are quite voluminous. Feel free to dive in and see what you could find and learn. Graph Devs, that is a new Twitter account that has just launched a few weeks ago. Go ahead and sign up to Graph Devs. Any core development team that has updates, we try to put one post on there per day that relates specifically to new things on the graph specific to developers, or sometimes we'll be doing dives into subgraphs and substreams and seeing what techniques they're using. So look at that as kind of like a daily news feed for stuff that's happening with subgraphs, substreams. Also, of course, the Graph Discord, that's always available. Hop in and say hi. Developers, very senior and very junior, are in there all the time, so they're there to help. And also shout out to our support team. They are fantastic. If you have any bugs or errors or blockers, go ahead and hop in there. The support team will be there quickly. Of course, what you can do also is go and search on YouTube. YouTube has, this is Graph Builder's newsletter. Graph Builder's newsletter is a newsletter I write every single month for builders out there that are developing with subgraphs and substreams that really just gives highlights for the month. So subscribe to that, check that out. Really learn what's new in the space. Also, Builders DAO. Shout out to Builders DAO. Builders DAO is awesome. They are some of the best subgraph and substream developers in the ecosystem, and they build for contract. So if anyone's out there looking to just hire out their subgraph or substream development, go ahead and contact them. And if you want to learn from them, they're available for you to reach out to and say, hey, I'd like to learn. And they are open to having people apply to join their DAO and see if you could learn with them. And then finally, of course, join the Graph YouTube. There's videos there and tutorials there regularly. So just hop in, immerse yourself as much as you can. And I know that was a lot of information for tip number 2. Tip number 2, A, if you will, or 2B, is, let me animate this because this is a bit overwhelming. Let's see, does this actually show on animation? Checking the chat. It does. Okay. All right, we're good. I'm just going to keep it here. Subgraph best practice number 1, if you are looking for a place to start. Subgraph best practice number 2, subgraph best practice number 3, and subgraph best practice number 4. Really, really, really make sure that you are starting with these. If you're looking for a place to start, use these best practices. If you have, let's say, built a subgraph 2 or 3 years ago, and you said, hey, maybe I need to look. There's a lot of new features actually in just these 4 best practices that are live and really improve the indexing speed and query speed of your subgraph. So go ahead and hop in, learn these if you're looking for a place to start. And otherwise, let's keep on going to these tips for our private deployed subgraphs. Tip number 3, ensure the correct usage of endpoints. When you are in Subgraph Studio, get used to becoming aware of the endpoints that are in front of you. Make sure that if you are using the /latest endpoint, you know what that means. And what that means is, let's say I deployed a new version of a subgraph 2 minutes ago, and it's only been indexed 30%. Well, when I use the /latest endpoint in my front end, I'm going to be sending a query to a subgraph that's only indexed to 30%, as opposed to a previous version, which might be indexed all the way to 100%. So if you're okay with that, that's fine, but just know the difference. When you actually specify a specific endpoint with a specific version, you're going to know exactly what you're going to get. If you do /latest, you might get older data that's not all the way up the chain head. So just know that when you're developing. That's honestly a common theme throughout building with subgraphs, because it is indexing, it does take time. Just make sure you know what endpoints you're using. Cool, tip number 3 done. So let's now go ahead and talk about the published subgraphs. We did a little bit of information on deployed subgraphs. Here we are with published subgraphs. Once again, published subgraphs have no rate limiting. They're public and available for anyone to take a look at and query. Of course, people can't develop on them because they're yours and you own them through Subgraph Studio, but they could find the endpoint and they can go ahead and start querying it. So here's a few tips with published subgraphs. The first tip is you want to add good metadata right before you publish your subgraph. Right before you publish your subgraph, of course, you want to think, all right, well, the world is going to see my new API, and I want to make sure that people can find this API on the Graph Explorer because I'm proud of the subgraph that I've built. It's a valuable piece of infrastructure, and I want people to find it. So put a good description in. Put your source code in there. Make sure people can take a look at your code and see what's going on. Put your website URL. What is this subgraph populating? Put that information in there. Put the categories in there. Make sure people know your work exists. That's really, really important, just for the health of the network and just understanding that this is open data. Next thing, right before you publish your subgraph, you need to look at what version you're publishing. Make sure you're publishing the right version, and then also make sure it's all the way synced to Chainhead when it's that deployed subgraph and it's still private, you're about to publish it. Make sure it's all the way synced to Chainhead. If you look at this subgraph right here, you see it's synced to 87%. Let's say I am to publish that subgraph that's at 87% to the graph network and expose that version to the world. Well, that latest version that's to the world will also only be synced up to 80% of the 87% of the data. So just when you're working on a new version and you've deployed a new version in the Subgraph Studio and it's your private subgraph, no one can see that new version, get that version all the way to Chainhead, then publish it. And when you publish that subgraph, it will automatically be synced all the way to Chainhead as soon as you have published it. So just make sure that's part of your regular practice when you're go ahead and go for that deployment to publishing phase. So those are the things that you want to do right as you're publishing and thinking about these things. Tip number 3, you want to think, how much quality of service do I want when I publish my subgraph to the graph network? When I add GRT onto this publication process, I am incentivizing indexers around the world to hop in and provide redundancy and better quality of service to my subgraph. If I want 3, 5, 10 indexers around the world to look at my subgraph and index that data, I need to add more GRT. Right now, I found a subgraph and it has 11 indexers on it. As I recall, it had around 5,000 GRT on it, maybe a little more, 6,000 GRT. So, and as you need to know, GRT is of course existing in an open market. And so when that open market, there's fluctuations, but go ahead and look at the different subgraphs on the graph network, see how much GRT is being used on some subgraphs and see how many indexers they have, and you can generally get an idea of how much curation you want to use to get that redundancy. Now, once again, if you're just a hacker and you don't want to have the rate limiting, you don't want to have rate limiting taken away, you don't want to have that redundancy, you just want to hack, you don't need to publish. You could just simply stay in the deployed state and just stay there for free. But once you publish, it does involve incentivizing indexers on the graph network. So that's tip number 3. Finally, tip number 4, know subgraph ID versus deployment ID. So When we're in Subgraph Studio with the deployed subgraph, that's going to be private. There's, of course, different versions and different version endpoints. When we have published our subgraph to the graph network, subgraph ID and deployment ID become important. Subgraph ID is the ID of the subgraph itself, and deployment ID is specific to the versions. So both have different endpoints. Both use different endpoint styles. So you need to be sure when you have a deployed subgraph, understand versioning. When you have a published subgraph, understand subgraph ID versus deployment ID and the versioning. And when you plug into either of those subgraphs, just make sure your front end, you understand the difference when you connect to your front end, whether it's a testing through your deployment or you're in production, which ones you want to use. And then also, this is a little cookbook I wrote up, Subgraph ID versus Deployment ID. I wrote this a few months ago. So just hop in. It's a short read, just 2 minutes, just to go over the differences. So those were the tips between deployment and deployed subgraphs and published subgraphs and how you interact with them in Studio. Stepping back, querying is, of course, what we want to do with our subgraphs and substreams. So when we're using GraphQL, just like any query language, there's optimized ways to use it. So go ahead and understand best practices to use GraphQL with our subgraphs and substreams. So go ahead and read this cookbook entry, Querying Best Practices, and go to our docs that's there, hop in. Good stuff right there. Other considerations, if deploying a subgraph to multiple chains, get used to using handlebars.js. It's really nice. Essentially, you get those double brackets to go ahead and template out and script out multiple chain deployment. That's really nice. And then also, anytime you're querying a subgraph on the graph network, you are going to be using an API key. Make sure that you have used the security that is baked into Subgraph Studio for your API keys. You can authorize specific subgraphs, specific APIs to be used with the specific subgraphs, and then you could also authorize domains to be used with a specific subgraph as well. So that's just 2 nice security features to be implemented. So for those of you who stuck around for 2 presentations, that was my second time through this due to a bug in Riverside, but okay, we're okay with things right now. If you're interested in joining the Graph ecosystem, feel free. And I'm going to hop into chat now and hopefully see better use. Questions. All right, better streaming. I love it. We are in. How many, let's see, subscribees in the newsletter? Currently, I think we're going to keep that internally. That's just a metric that we use, but that's, we've got a good amount. We'll say I'm really proud of the numbers we're getting. How many devs within the DAO as of now? I think right now, like builders, legit, like builders right now, I don't know off the top of my head that one either, but I mean, feel free to hop in. You'll see the devs in there all the time. They have their own Discord. Enjoy that. I personally am good friends with 4 of them, but I haven't been in there for a little bit. So 2 questions there. Let's see where the questions are with, I'm going to stop screen sharing right now. So much going on. How do I do this? Riverside.fm. How do I arc? Where's my arc? Where's my window? So much going on. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Let's just do that. Okay, where are we? We're on Riverside. We're doing good. I need multiple windows when I travel. That's the problem that I faced. I only had 1 window, and I'm using my phone for this. Okay, questions on live stream. Can you edit your own query fees? So no. So those query fees are, that's a question I'm seeing in YouTube. Query fees are just part of the network, and they go up or down depending on the market. So good question right there. And for published subgraphs, what if someone copies the code of another subgraph and deploys it and does not see the need to pay for the query fees of the original published subgraph? That's a great question. Any subgraph as it is published can go ahead and, I mean, any subgraph that is on their GitHub is public. That can be forked and can actually go ahead and there can be 2 versions and 2 different things on 2 different versions of that exact same subgraph published. That is absolutely possible. Typically, what we see is not competing subgraphs on the graph network. This has been an open market for years already. Typically, we see 1 subgraph and that one rise to the top. So in terms of like, could that happen? Sure. I have not seen 2 subgraphs significantly competing for any sort of volume. Typically, one pulls ahead simply because of better market knowledge. People are more aware of that subgraph. It has possibly more curation on it. The market works its magical, invisible hand. So, um, and that is two questions from Justice on YouTube. Thank you so much, Justice, for that. I'm going to go ahead and check elsewhere. Yeah, I'm seeing in chat there's many tabs open. Yeah, I had you guys managing chat. This is I think I hit a threshold of managing chat windows. Being at a conference right now, being in a hotel with new internet, I think I hit threshold. Let's see if there's any information in any questions on the chat in Graph Devs on the Twitter there. All right. So funny. Well, I appreciate everyone taking the time here. I'm not seeing questions in there. I appreciate everyone taking the time today, the double time today, for watching this presentation twice if you did. And shout out to Dave for editing this down. Shout out to Yana also for streaming, and all of the people that I know in the graph ecosystem. Love you, love you, love you. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. And feel free to share this workshop once it's on the Graph YouTube to any developers getting started and wanting to better understand developing in Subgraph Studio and kind of how that workflow goes. So, with that all being said, have a good rest of your day, everybody. Enjoy, enjoy, enjoy this Thursday, and take care, everyone. Bye bye.